Supply is a key factor of what we need to be driving in the market, and I think build to rent will play that role.
Talk me through how construction productivity issues impacted the bottom line.
I think if I look at the performance of the result this year, there were two key elements to the result. Firstly, we've been simplifying the group, and we've done some 2.5 billion of capital recycling over the last 12 months at or above book. We've exited our international construction operations, and then we've taken significant cost out. We set ourselves a target of 125, of which we exceeded, we delivered 141. In the investment development and construction segments, our investment business margins were up and we had solid growth. Our development was up on the back of completion of two key developments here in Sydney. So that saw the returns of both investment and development. Construction was a bit weaker, but that was driven by the first half, because we called out, we had a couple of key projects where we had some issues and some losses. We saw our margins in the second half improve back to 4%. And so that's back to the more our historical highs. We normally average between 3 to 4. So the second half of the year, the construction business really started to get back to its normal target returns. And also we secured some $5 billion worth of new construction work, which is up materially on the previous year by some 50%. And that was across defence, social infrastructure, and data centres are being three big sectors. So we're starting to see a real pivot and growth back into the construction sector for us as Lendlease.
The Productivity Commission says construction productivity has gone backwards for some 50 years. How do you see that reflected in Lendlease's business?
Yeah, if I compare the business across the different states, I would say in the last 12 months across New South Wales, Victoria, we've seen a real improvement in productivity. We're getting back to our 5 days a week, and that's across our projects which we manage in the business. I'd say it's variable across some of the other states, and to me, with this national summit on around productivity, I think it would be useful around how we approach various key conditions around our EBA and agreements going forward. And it's not Lendlease, it's actually our supply chain that gets impacted. And a couple of key suggestions that we've made in particular, for instance, in some states it's a flexible RDO regime, in other states it's fixed. So what that means on a flexible regime, we can keep the site open all the time and manage those RDOs over time. Versus if it's a fixed site RDO, we have to close down the whole project. And so things like that impact productivity. I think the government thinking through how we manage planning and other key conditions, I think at the moment is they're talking about national codes. There's been a lot of changing to building codes. It'd be great, and I hear that Minister O'Neill talked about keeping it now consistent. Let's lock it down so the industry can focus on executing the code at hand, and that will drive productivity. If we constantly have change with those codes, it just makes it complex to follow the rules and execute because it's always changing. So a couple of those key things that are flagged to be changed will make a big difference for the industry.
How disappointed will you be if industrial relations isn't discussed this week?
Look, I think it's important that there's a couple of things that I would love discussed, and that's around the skilling of workforce. In our industry, we do have an ageing workforce, and therefore we don't have the same level of skills that we probably had a decade ago. And post-COVID, we had a lot of people leave the industry. So I'd love to see things around apprenticeships. I can hear that some of the states are starting to focus on that. So nationally, it'd be great to really put some effort behind how we train and upskill. And if we can't get the people through, we've got to think about where we do have migration, getting immigrants or skilled labour into our construction industry, because housing's an issue. Affordable housing, when I look at inflation since the pandemic across the construction sector, it has gone up by some 30 or 40%. So it is going to be important to get those right skills, because that will really help deliver and execute the strategies a lot of people in our industry are sort of crying out for. So I think if we can focus on skills, if we can focus on some of the things to do with agreements and codes, I think those things can make a big difference for the industry going forward.
And from a company perspective, is there more Lendlease can do to improve its own productivity, perhaps in the AI space?
I mean, on a couple of fronts, we've been focused firstly on training. We've upticked some of our resources around skilling and apprenticeships, so that's one. We have been pushing the business to focus on modular. And so modular construction techniques where things can be done off-site and being assembled on-site is a key component to driving efficiency where we can get repeatability. Across AI, I think it's at its inception, and we're starting to leverage AI in how we manage some of the resources in more of our support functions. And so that's an area that we're trying to drive efficiency. For us, it's getting that productivity to continue to grow as we are focused on growth. So I think AI can be a real good enablement to help the business grow into the future and drive some productivity and efficiency throughout the whole business.
On the government's housing target, how big a role do you see build to rent playing in bringing that to fruition?
Well, in markets like the US, build to rent is a key component. I mean, when I look at the housing market, they would have 30 to 40% as build to rent product and then the rest as for sale product. I think on build to rent here, we're in its infancy, and I think what it will do is help supply. Supply is a key factor of what we need to be driving in the market, and I think build to rent will play that role. We've got some 3 towers currently today which are in production, so it's about 1,800 apartments that we will have for rent. We are aiming and targeting to have about 10,000 over the coming years as we continue to develop out and roll out that strategy. And we're getting strong capital support from our international capital partners, like our Japanese partners, for instance, and our Canadian partners who understand the sector from their own markets and are very keen to participate. So that supply will just help manage rents and rent growth. By the more supply, it takes the just pressure off the amount of stock that's available for rent.
In terms of build to rent, what's key? Is it location? And what is your experience of how the different tiers of government are working on this model to enable it to get underway much more quickly?
Well, I think at the federal level, they've introduced some taxes which have helped relieve around withholding taxes and different things. It's made it attractive for foreign capital to come in and invest along our industry funds here. I think the second thing at the planning level, as governments look to release new projects that may be on government land, by putting in requirements to have a level of affordability, that's ensuring that the industry responds with either affordable housing solutions or new build to rent solutions, and then just speeding up the planning process. And we've seen that across a number of the different states. We had a development here in New South Wales where there is a new planning regime. We put some key worker housing in. It was supposed to be a 12-month approval. It actually came in 7 months. So those things that governments are doing at the state and the federal level are all helping to approve faster. That means we can get those developments into production quicker.
There are plenty of knockers when it comes to the government's 2030 housing target. Do you think with focus, such as the roundtable's focus this week, that target can be achieved?
Look, I think there's a target out there and we need to increase housing supply in Australia. With the population growth post the pandemic that ran up to 1 million over that two-year period, we need to increase supply. So I think the government's done the right thing by enabling and putting out a very bold target. It's up to the industry now to respond. I think the focus is on some of the red tape, which I do believe at a state level has been addressed. And it's great to see it's back on the agenda that we're talking about this. Recently, we had a federal approval on a heritage site for our build to rent product at the Queen Victoria Market. That process came in, gave the approval, increased another 500 plus housing units for that site. So we'll deliver 1,100 housing units for rent again in that location. So I think the government's doing all the right things. I just think the market setting, we just need to keep seeing a level of productivity. And to me, we can only do that if we get consistency across all states. The consistency allows businesses to respond in a very structured manner around the investment we can put into the sector. And as a business, that's what we're gearing up to. Build to rent will be a key component, and hopefully that will start to support government in delivering some of the supply we need in Australia for housing.
But is it challenged as a consequence of the other big priorities this government has, such as the renewable transition, which is enormous? There's also now talk of a rollout of data centres as proposed by Scott Farquhar. Can we do all of these things at once?
I don't think we have a choice. I think the government's going to have to finally balance as the economy continues to evolve, making sure we stay on the forefront with data centres. We're getting access to the best technology and the fastest technology because it has a knock-on to productivity. The transition needs to take place and we need more housing. So it's how we balance those three key areas of focus that are required today and do that with a very considered plan over the coming decades. It really does require a level of bipartisan support to make sure we can execute that overall strategy. But I think it's important that we're tackling all three things. Otherwise, something else will end up falling behind. And I do think we need to put equal weighting on all those issues and make sure we progress in a smart way as a nation.
Tony Lombardo, thanks for joining the program.
Thank you very much, Kirsten.